Hey everyone, it's your boy, Haven. Today we'll be exploring the Houses of the North. This is the grand finale of all of my Every House Explained videos. As always, we'll be going through the canon, semi-canon and non-canon houses within this mod. As always, like and subscribe for more content, whether it's CK3 stuff or animated lore, and check out the Patreon if you're interested. Now let's get on with it, let's begin. The Lord Paramounts of the North are of course House Stark, a grey direwolf on white. Winter is coming. Oh wait, sorry, let me do that again. Winter is coming. That is not a 19-year-old. So here in the mod we have 3 cadet branches, of course the OG House Stark, but we also have House Grey Stark, as well as House Karstark and House Cassel, all of which we'll be looking at in more detail later on. House Stark was founded by Bran the Builder, this guy. Legends say that this guy built Winterfell, the Wall, maybe even Storm's End itself, perhaps even the cheeky Hightower. There are all kinds of myths and legends that he worked with giants and children of the forest, and that he granted Brandon's Gift to the Night's Watch. So that's this strip of land, Brandon's Gift. His son was also called Brandon. I'm not going to lie, there's going to be a lot of Brandons coming up. There are rumours that this Brandon may have been the one who designed the High Tower for Old Town instead of his father, but we don't really know. Here we have Bran the Breaker. This guy formed an alliance with the King Beyond the Wall, known as Joramun, to overthrow the Night's King. The Night's King being a mysterious, legendary Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, I believe the 13th Lord Commander. He married a woman with pale skin and blue eyes. Some people theorise it's a White Walker that he married, and he basically crowned himself king and ruled the Night's Watch from the Night Fort. We don't exactly know what house he belongs to, but there are different rumours that he's a Flint, an Umber, a Bolton, and even a Stark, and in the mod they've canonised it and made him a Stark. They've made him Bran the Breaker's brother. And there's the Night's Queen. Further down the Stark family tree we have the first King Jon, this being the King Jon Stark who built the Wolf's Den. Here's Theon the Hungry Wolf, who defeated Argo Sevenstar, who was an Andal warlord. And here's Brandon the Daughterless. He's part of the Beowulf the Bard legend. So basically there was a king beyond the wall who was called a coward by by King Stark. So he took the name Beowulf the Bard and he snuck into Winterfell disguised as a minstrel, and he kidnapped the Stark King's daughter and got her pregnant. We don't know her name, but the mod has named the daughter Lyanna because there are obvious parallels between the Lyanna Stark we know from the main books being kidnapped by Rhaegar and this Stark daughter being kidnapped by a king, you know. And her bastard daughter with Beowulf the Bard ended up becoming the new king, who went on to unknowingly slay his own father in battle. Where is he? Beowulf the Bard. He said he was unable to fight back against his own son. Legitimised bastard and kinslayer, that's cool. There's King Harlan Stark, who starved out the Boltons during the Bolton Grey Stark uprising. There's Brandon the Shipwright, who tried to sail across the Sunset Sea but was never seen again. And there's his son Bran the Burner, who, in his grief, basically burnt the entire Stark fleet. Here's Roderick Stark, the king who won Bear Island from the Ironborn. And his brother here is Osric, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who was elected age 10. Edric Snowbeard lived to an old age. His reign was full of, you know, his children and grandchildren quarrelling. He had issues with Ironborn, wildlings up north, slavers attacking, Boltons rising up. It was a mayhem. Brandon Ice Eyes, which is a cool name. He recovered Wolf Den from slavers that had captured it. King Brandon the Bad, also known as Dark Brandon. We don't know anything about him, but Bran sees his statue in the crypts of Winterfell during a Clash of Kings, I think. So they've kind of taken some artistic license, making him arrogant, sadistic, wrathful, deceitful. They've also given him some executions, so a Bolton and a couple of locks. Of course, the last Stark king was Lord Torrhen Stark himself, the king who knelt. When Aegon conquered the Seven Kingdoms, Torrhen Stark did not fight. He instead bent the knee and gave up his crown, and in return was named Lord Paramount of the North. He was succeeded by Brandon the Boisterous. Lord Walton Stark rode north to quell a Night's Watch mutiny. He chased them beyond the wall, but was killed by giants. This guy, Lord Alaric, was persuaded by Queen Alysanne Targaryen to grant this piece of land known as the New Gift to the Night's Watch. Lord Ellard Stark supported Laenor Velaryon's claim during the Great Council of 101, and Lord Rickon Stark bent the knee to Rhaenyra when she was a child and swore fealty to her. And we see him in House of the Dragon episode 1. When he died, his son was but a child, Cregan, and so Cregan's uncle Bernard became the Lord Regent of the North. When Cregan came of age, he didn't want to give up his power, and so Cregan had him and his sons imprisoned. And we're going to meet Lord Cregan in House of the Dragon Season 2, so skip to the chapter after this one if you don't want any House of the Dragon spoilers. So in the book, Jacaerys negotiates with Cregan Stark, and they sort of form a bromance, and Cregan Stark agrees to join Team Black. Even after the death of Rhaenyra, he marches south to King's Landing, and initiates what's known as the Hour of the Wolf, which is basically like a post-war purge. In the show, he's going to be played by a lad called Tom Taylor, so I can't wait to see what he brings to the role. Now, in Fire and Blood, there are multiple sources, and Mushroom, one of the least trustworthy sources, claimed that Cregan Stark had a mysterious bastard half-sister called Sarah Snow, and that Jacaerys Velaryon fell in love with Sarah and they married secretly, and it was a whole thing. Whether this element will be in the show, I'm not sure, but we'll have to see. So this guy was killed by Scargosi during the Scargosi Uprising. Don't worry, we'll be getting into Scargos later. But yes, this uprising happened during the first Blackfyre Rebellion, which is why the North didn't intervene. Which I completely forgot to mention in my House Blackfyre video somehow. Here's Lord Beren Stark. He famously made common cause with Casterly Rock and the Lannisters to fight against Dagon Greyjoy, known as the Last Reaver. His death caused a succession crisis. He had daughters who all sort of wanted to inherit him. And I think this is probably the plot point that the future Dunk and Egg novella, She-Wolves of Winterfell, will be about, but I'm not fully sure. This guy, Willem Stark, he fought against King Raymond Redbeard, who I talked about in my Umber video. He fought with Harmond the Drunken Giant, but he was slain. There we go. But then his brother Artos took revenge and slew Raymond Redbeard himself. And then we go down to Rickard Stark himself. Rickard Stark fought in the War of the Ninepenny Kings, where he befriended Jon Arryn, and he sent his son Eddard to the Eyrie to be raised. After his daughter Lyanna Stark was kidnapped by Rhaegar Targaryen, he rode to King's Landing to confront the Mad King Aerys. But as you can see here, he was burnt alive. He was cooked in his armour, and his eldest son Brandon Stark was also present, and he was also killed. There we go, executed by the Mad King. Wrathful, authoritative, brave, arrogant, strong. He had wolf's blood, you know, he was a hot-blooded warrior and a womanizer. He slept with Barbary Riswell, he may have slept with Ashara Dane. He was initially betrothed to Catelyn Tully and nearly killed Peter Baelish over her, but, you know, it didn't work out. Lyanna, of course, was the epic horse girl, a bit of a tomboy, I guess. And she was kidnapped by Rhaegar and died of a fever, supposedly, but most likely she's the mother of Jon Snow. It's even more uncomfortable having the age next to the name. Like, Rhaegar, come on, man, what were you doing? And then there's Benjen, Big Benji, who goes on to join the Night's Watch, and he becomes the first Ranger, and he disappears in the first book, and we never see him again. But yeah, this is Neddard himself, an honourable man, the protagonist of the first book, arguably. Let's look at his traits. Honest, yep, very honest, too honest, and I'm giving you time to escape. And of course, with that information, Cersei's like, oh, okay, so I can just counter-coup you then. Honourable, of course, that's his whole shtick. Trusting, and just. He who swings the sentence shall pass the sword. Wait, hold on, no. And he's wielding Ice, the ancestral Valyrian greatsword of House Stark. And he married his brother's widow, Catelyn Tully. Obviously, it's Robert's Rebellion, so no kids yet, but they go on to have Robb and Sansa and Arya and Bran and Rickon. Who can forget Rickon, apart from everyone? When I do my inevitable animated history of House Stark, oh, that's gonna be a big one. That's gonna be like 40 minutes or something. There's a lot of history to get through. Looking at the cadet branches, we have House Greystark, which is extinct. In the mod, they've inverted the colours for the sigil. We don't know much about them except that they were Lords of Wolf's Den, and they rose up with the Boltons to take Winterfell, but they ended up being crushed and wiped out. We'll get into the other three later. As well as ruling the entirety of the North, House Stark also rules the Duchy of Winterfell itself. Within that, they rule the county of Bran's Wood, the Pitch, and Winterfell. And within Winterfell, we have the city of Wintertown, which is the name of the town that's outside the city walls. Let's start with the Duchy of Winterfell itself. The counties of Cedar Peaks and Dawn Forest are ruled by House Mollen, a snowy pine tree, growing ever taller. We know of one Mollen, that being, where is he? This guy, Hallis. Hallis Moran grows up to be the captain of the Winterfell Guard after Jory Cassel is killed. He accompanies Catelyn to Bitterbridge in the second book, and afterwards he's tasked with delivering Neddard's bones to Winterfell, but he hasn't arrived yet, we don't know anything about his fate. The county of Coldstream is ruled by House Poole, and here we have, well, basically a blue pool on white. This guy, Vayon Poole, is the steward of Winterfell in the main books, and here. Cool. He's good with money, that's good. Vayon Poole joins Ned in his journey to King's Landing, but he's purged by the Lannisters after Ned's arrest. She hasn't been born yet, but his daughter is Jane Poole. She accompanies Sansa in King's Landing, and after the death of her father, she basically gets kidnapped by Littlefinger, who quote-unquote trains her in his brothel. She's later disguised as Arya Stark and then married to Ramsay Bolton, but rescued by Theon. She's currently on the way to the Wall, hopefully to safety, suffering from broken ribs and a frostbitten nose, because I guess George hates her for some reason. And finally, the Lordship of Wolf Branch is ruled by House Cassel. 10 direwolf heads on grey, so a cadet branch of House Stark. There's a canon historical character called Lonor Snow, and the mod has made him the founder of House Cassel, which is quite cool. So this guy Martin was slain at the Tower of Joy when fighting against the Three Kingsguard guarding Lyanna Stark. His son Jory, of course, Jory Cassel, the one and only, becomes the captain of the Winterfell Guard, and he goes with Ned to King's Landing but gets slain by Jaime Lannister. His uncle is Rodrik Cassel. They've got the whiskers, nice. So Rodrik is the Master at Arms of Winterfell, and he accompanies Catelyn during the first book. In the second book he holds command of Winterfell, and he tries to retake it from Theon and the Ironborn, but he gets his arm chopped off by Ramsay Snow and he's killed. So I think what we're going to do is start south and work our way up north. I think we'll check out the west of the north and go up to the northern mountains, then we'll go back down and go up the east, and we'll end with the island of Skargos. So that means we must begin with the southernmost point of the north, known as the Neck. Yeah, the Crannog men live here. They're sort of weird swamp dwellers. House Reed is in charge of the Neck, and they've ruled it since the Marsh Kings of old were driven out by the Starks. It's a black lizard lion on green. Beware our bite. A lizard lion is basically the Westerosi way of saying alligator, I guess. Oh look, the High Sparrow. So yes, Howland is a short king. I can't help but respect that. A miracle worker, pilgrim, mastermind philosopher. He's a mysterious man, what can I say? There it is, there's his castle, I found it. So yeah, he was at the tourney of Harrenhal when he was younger, and he was beaten up by squires, but then Lyanna Stark came to his rescue. During Robert's Rebellion, he accompanies Ned to the Tower of Joy, and he's basically the only survivor besides Ned. He supposedly saved Ned's life from Arthur Dayne. In the show, he explicitly stabs Arthur in the back of the neck. We haven't actually seen him in the main books yet. So yeah, this place is Greywater Watch, his castle, which apparently floats on the water. It sort of, no one knows where it is. It allegedly moves around, which is clearly a reference to How's moving castle. They haven't been born yet, but he has a son and a daughter, Jojen and Mira Reed. They actually travel to Winterfell in the books, and they they befriend Bran, and they all travel beyond the Wall to meet the Three-Eyed Raven. Bran has a crush on Mira, and Jojen is a Greenseer, and maybe Paste. It's a long story. As well as ruling over the Duchy of the Neck, the Reeds rule over the counties of Boromose, Cypress Bottom, Dewlock, Slunas, and of course Greywater Watch itself. The county of Cray is ruled by House Cray. 3 green serpents on brown, beware the hiss. And the county of the Mire is ruled by House Quag. Both of these houses are canon. We don't know anything about them except that they are Crannogman houses. Moving on to the Duchy of Silverreed, which isn't actually a duchy, and it doesn't have a duke, but it can be given to House Reed. So House Reed rule the counties of Cherwell and Cranbrook. The Duchy of Drenchmire is ruled by House Boggs. Again, Crannogmen from the Neck. They are of course not to be confused with House Boggs of the Crownlands. The county of Fenwell is ruled by House Fen. We came by canoe. Again, a Crannogman house. And I mentioned Lonal Snow earlier, the mod made him the founder of the Greystarks. His mother was a Fen, Wyler Fen. And the county of Seastrands is ruled by House Greengood, which is just another canon Crannogman house. The Duchy of Fever, not a duchy, but can be granted to House Blackmire. So the Reeds rule over the counties of Fever and Shallow Seek. The county of Greycan is ruled by House Blackmire, soaring above. And the county of Peatlands is ruled by House Peat. There we go. Not much to say, again, these are just, they're all Cranogman houses mentioned in the books. We don't know much about them, but they are canon. And if you're wondering what this tiny bit of land is, it's none other than Moat Cailin, or as George R. R. Martin says, Moat Caillan. Yeah, this is just a tiny little duchy ruled directly by the Starks. Moving on to the Duchy of Flint's Fingers, ruled by House Flint, the Stone Hand, Shields of the West. I guess they are shields against the Ironborn. Now there are 3 separate Flint houses. This one is treated in the mod as a cadet branch. We'll go into the other ones later. In the past there was a Lord Commander Roderick Flint, this guy, who actually attempted to become a king beyond the wall, which apparently was an act of madness that nearly destroyed the Night's Watch itself. Down here we have Timothy Flint, a bastard, or Timothy Snow rather, who fights during the Dance of the Dragons, and afterwards he founded a sellsword company known as the Wolf Pack with Hallis Hornwood. So interestingly, we know that there's a blind lord who was this blind noble who lived on the Flint Cliffs when Balon Greyjoy was 10 years old and he used to climb the cliffs and so on. And so they've made him a Flint, and it's this old blind man. That's a cool little touch. The Flints of Flint's Finger rule basically every single county, apparently. Apart from Cape Kraken, this one, which is ruled by House Hayes on Salty Shores. House Hayes is a non-canon house. The Duchy of the Lakelands is not a duchy and does not have a duke, but it can be granted to House Wells. So the counties of Cypress Rising, that sounds like the name of a movie, Moranland, Mirkwood and Spear Sound is House Flint, but House Wells rule over the county of Waterstones. A drink from the trough. Not to be confused with House Wells of Dawn. Completely different. So in my Dawn video I talked a bit about this. That there's a guy called Theoden Wells. Theoden the True, who's this pious knight who becomes a commander of the Warrior's Sons. And he's dragging Cersei through the streets of King's Landing during her Walk of Shame. It's never clarified in the books whether he's the Dornish House Wells or the Northern House Wells, but the mod has made him a Northerner. So he's a rare Northerner who worships the Faith of the Seven as opposed to the old gods. Let's move up to the Duchy of the Barrowlands, ruled by House Dustin. There's a black crown and a couple of rusty long axes on yellow. The first crowned. So the Dustins are descended from the Barrow Kings, who, like many of the kings throughout the north, thousands of years ago they were defeated by House Stark and they submitted and became lords. If we go very far back in the past, we have a bastard here, Dennis Snow. Look at that beard. Dennis fought at the battle beneath the God's Eye for Aegon the Uncrowned, who was fighting against Maegor the Cruel, and he got killed. Now there is another interesting historical Dustin, but there are heavy House of the Dragon spoilers here, so again, skip to the next chapter if you do not want to be spoiled. There he is, Roderick. Roddy the Ruin. Absolute nutcase. So Roddy the Ruin led 2,000 Winter Wolves, that's the name of his soldiers, down south to fight for Rhaenyra. They defeated the Westermen at the Battle by the Lakeshore. They fought during the Butcher's Ball, and also during the First Battle of Tumbleton, and that's where Roddy the Ruin himself was slain. And here we have Willem Dustin, who is still alive because it's Robert's Rebellion, but he's one of Ned Stark's little entourage who goes to the Tower of Joy and he gets killed. What else do we know about the Dustins? We know that Willem had an uncle who was apparently skilled with an axe, so that must be this guy. We know that he had a great uncle who fought in the War of the Ninepenny Kings, and so that's this guy, Eddard Dustin. The mod has given him a great uncle and therefore, a bunch of cousins. So Willem married Barbary Riswell, and we'll go into House Riswell soon. In the books, she currently rules Barrowton as Lady Dustin. The Dustins rule the counties of Barrowton itself, as well as Barlow, Draywinds, Drumlin, Heapsdown, Mundpress, and Spearmouth. Oh, and Roastfields. These are some names. There's a city of Barrowton itself. The county of Goldgrass, however, is ruled by House Stout. House Stout are canon. They are described as being Dustin vassals specifically. Here we have the brown chevronels. Stand firm. We know of a Harwood Stout, this guy. Harwood Stout attends the fake wedding between Ramsay Bolton and Jane Poole, aka Arya Stark, and he's later seen by Theon talking with Hother Umber and Roger Riswell, and some people theorise that maybe his loyalty to the Boltons is but a ruse. There's a Ronald Stout who serves under Roose Bolton during the War of the Five Kings, and there is an old lad called Sir Winton Stout, who almost became Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He's currently at the Wall, and by the time of the books he's basically kind of senile. The county of Old Barrow is ruled by House Brown Barrow, which is actually semi-canon. So interestingly, this house is mentioned in the Telltale Game of Thrones video game. And so I guess because the word Barrow was in the house, the developers thought, let's add it to the Barrowlands. Moving westward to the Duchy of the Rills. House Riswell, a black horse head with a red mane and red eyes. It's badass. On horseback. Okay, that's slightly less badass. So the Rills were once ruled by the Rider Kings, who were defeated by the Starks, and so clearly at some point the Riswells took over. Historically, there's a tragic Riswell tale. There's an old Lord Riswell in the past, whose youngest son was one of 79 Night's Watch deserters who escaped the Wall and fled to the Rills. And Lord Riswell sent them all back to the Wall, knowing that they were going to be executed, including his own son. And as he was dying, he basically took the black so that he could go to the Wall and be there when his son was executed. A tragic tale. But if we're looking at the present, Roderick Riswell is one of the first lords to declare fealty to Roose Bolton after he becomes Warden of the North. And he attends Ramsay's wedding at Winterfell. And here his eldest daughter is Bethany Riswell, who becomes Roose Bolton's second wife. So yeah, there's not much love between the couple, considering, in Roose's own words, she never made a sound in bed. They've given her the sadistic trait here. I think that's probably in reference to the fact that the original Reek, right, Reek version 1, called Heek, who's this like stinky peasant basically, that he stole Bethany Riswell's perfume and drank it so that he would smell better. And he was caught drinking it, and so he was whipped. So I guess the implication is Bethany ordered that himself. So they've made her a bit sadistic, I guess. She eventually died of a fever. And here we have her sister Barbary, who's described as quite a handsome woman. So she hates Ned Stark because, you know, he sent her husband to death at the Tower of Joy and he didn't even bring back his bones. She's also a bit of a conspiracy theorist. So Brandon Stark took her maidenhead but didn't want to marry her, apparently. Instead, he was married off to Catelyn. And she says there's some kind of Maester conspiracy. She calls them grey rats. She talks about Southron ambitions, etc. She's currently at Winterfell. She seems pro-Bolton, but also she hates the Boltons. And here we have the three sons of Roderick. We have Rickard, Roger and Roose, who is of course named after Roose Bolton. So yeah, apparently they all attend the Winterfell wedding and they're always arguing with each other, and it's commented upon that they all basically look the same. So it is kind of funny that they do kind of look the same. So there is a Mark Riswell who's slain at the Tower of Joy, but we don't know how he's related to the main branch, and so the mod has made him a cousin of Lord Roderick. Here he is. As well as ruling over the Duchy of the Rills, they rule over the counties of Atwater, Bottom Run, Grailheart, Small Rill, Sodden Burn, Tackfeld, and Two Rivers. The county of Greyforge Hills is ruled by House Ironsmith, by Blade and Hoof. This is a semi-canon house that's on the Citadel website. The county of Rillwater Crossing is ruled by House Glenmore, a white bow and arrow on red. Never relent, never yield. Now, House Glenmore are another semi-canon house. Again, they're from the Telltale Game of Thrones game. All we know is that they're from a place called Rillwater Crossing, apparently, and so it makes sense to have put them here in the Rills. And finally, the county of Withered Heath is ruled by House Ryder. I mentioned them before. The Rills were ruled by the Ryder Kings, who were then defeated by the Starks. So the mod is saying, oh no, they're not extinct, they've just been reduced to counts. And here we have a black knight on horseback, ride with fury. Going up, we have the Duchy of King's Course, ruled by House Kerwin, a black double-headed axe on grey, honed and ready. So the Kerwins are literally a close and powerful ally of the Starks. When I read the books, I always pronounced it in my head as Serwyn, but in the show they say Kerwin, so I'm going to go with Kerwin for this. Lord Medger, what a name. Medger Kerwin was placed under Roose Bolton's command during the War of the Five Kings. He's captured at the Battle of the Green Fork at the start of the war, and later he dies of his wounds. He is succeeded by a son that does not yet exist, but his son is Clay Kerwin. He attends the Harvest Feast of Winterfell in the second book, and he rides with Roderick Cassel to retake Winterfell from Theon, but just like Roderick, he is killed by the Bolton forces. He's also in the show. He has a little cameo, he kind of appears and then vanishes. And we know that Medger has a plump daughter called Janelle Kerwin, so they've made her gluttonous. She becomes the Lady of Castle Kerwin after her father and brother die, and she swears fealty to the Iron Throne after the War of the Five Kings. It's currently unknown as to whether she's taking part in the Winterfell wedding, because she's not mentioned. So they rule the counties of Sharpwater, Thorpe, Trenchwood and Windmend. But the county of Eagle Cross is ruled by House Condon. What even is that? A red eagle head. Oh yeah, eagle-eyed, lion-hearted, so an eagle's head and 2 red tridents underneath on white. They are canon. There is a knight in service to House Cerwyn called Sir Kyle Condon. There he is. He is left by Roose Bolton to defend the trident, and we don't really hear about him since, so not sure if he's dead or alive. Next up we have the Edgewood, ruled by House Tallheart. 3 tall trees, proud and free. You may notice this man is not a lord, he is a master. So in the books there are some northerners who are called masters, so this guy is the master of Torrhen Square. And from what I understand, I could be wrong, but I think masters are the northern equivalent of landed knights. So knighthood is a big part of the Faith of the Seven, and most northerners aren't followers of the faith, they worship the old gods. Masters essentially fulfill the role that landed knights do in the south. So Helman Tallheart himself, he joins his forces with Roose Bolton at Harrenhal during the War of the Five Kings, and he seizes Castle Darry from the Lannisters. But then Roose tells him to torch Castle Darry and march on to Duskendale with Robert Glover, which of course is a pointless exercise, and it gets him killed at the Battle of Duskendale, because Randall Tarley is there and he's waiting. It was all a big trap, basically, a way for Roose Bolton to kill off a bunch of northern men. His son is this guy, Benfred Tallheart. He's described as a noisy and bluff character. He surrounds himself with a company of lancers, and he calls them the Wild Hares. And when Theon and the Ironborn plunder the Stony Shore, he rides off with his men to fight them, but they surprise him, and they're all massacred. Benfred himself is confronted by Theon Greyjoy, and then Theon's uncle Aeron drowns him to death. And with her father and brother dead, the current lady of House Tallheart has not been born yet. But she is Adara Tallheart. She's currently held captive by Dagmar Cleftjaw, who hold Torrhen Square currently. We also know of a Leopold Tallheart, who joins Roderick Cassel in trying to take Winterfell back, but you guessed it, he gets killed and betrayed by the Boltons. His sons haven't been born yet, but in the books they are Brandon and Beren, and just like their female cousin, they are held captive by Dagmar Cleftjaw. The Tallhearts rule the counties of Amber Lake, Denwood, Edgewood Hills and Torrhen Square. The county of Silverglade is ruled by House Eliver, humble in victory, whereas the county of Timberwatch is ruled by House Grayson, firm of mind. Both of these houses that I just mentioned are, once again, houses from the Telltale Game of Thrones video game, which I haven't played yet, but I should livestream that. The Duchy of Grey Downs is ruled by House Slate, Dahonar Blades. Just grey on grey. It's a slate, okay? It's a slate. So the Slates used to rule as kings, apparently, before they were defeated by the Starks. And all we know about them is that they lost men at the Red Wedding. Slate men later go on to attend the Winterfell wedding. Here we have Lord Rorge and his son, Rorge. I guess they love that name. They rule the counties of Blackpool? Interesting. Gravelridge, Slowburn, Stonebrand and the Welts. The county of First Hollow is ruled by House Caulfield. Now again, this is a kind of semi-canon house, but they're not from a video game, they're from the Game of Thrones TV show. It's mentioned in Season 5, I think, and it's a very specific reference to Bernadette Caulfield, who was one of the executive producers for the show. So I think Benioff and Weiss threw in her name as a sort of a thank you. And here we have a bunch of basically like cauliflowers. Blood and history. Next up we have the Duchy of the Wolfswood, a big wooded area ruled by House Glover, a mailed fist on red. None escape our grasp. They used to be Glover kings, but you guessed it, they were reduced to vassals by the Starks. In the past we had a Benton Glover, who was the first ranger of the Night's Watch, and he was the man who escorted Queen Alysanne Targaryen atop the wall during her visit. But let's go back to the main books. This guy, Ethan Glover, is the current lord of the Wolfswood. Actually, let me correct myself, he's not the lord, because as you can see, it's another master situation, so northern equivalent of landed knights. So Ethan Glover is the master of the Wolfswood, but he dies at the Tower of Joy. And so in the books, the current master is Galbart Glover. He doesn't have any kids, his brother is his heir. He's described as he's just a good loyal man. And here we have, he's just, he's content, he's diligent. He fights at the Battle of the Whispering Wood, and the Battle of the Camps. And he's present when Robb is declared king in the north. He doesn't actually die during the War of the Five Kings. In fact, we don't really know where he is. Last we see him, he's being sent off by Robb and a couple of others to sail up to Greywater Watch, and some readers suspect that he has Robb Stark's will, naming his heir, so he'll probably be in the future. He's also got a cheeky little cameo in the first season of Game of Thrones at the end. But yes, his brother is his heir, Robert Glover. Robert also fights in War of the Five Kings, under Roose Bolton specifically. He's also sent by Roose to attack Duskendale as part of that whole trap, and he retreats, but he's captured by the Mountain. Later on, he's released from captivity at White Harbour, and he joins Wyman Manderly's plot to rescue Rickon and declare for Stannis. Now, Robert has a couple of kids, Gawain and Irena, who are captured when Asha Greyjoy takes Deepwood Motte, but then they are later freed when Stannis takes it from her. Here we have an Irena Glover, who we know is the wife of Jorah Mormont, who ended up dying, and the mod has given her pneumonia, which is lovely. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Robert Glover is in the show, played by Tim McInnery, and he does his whole, "The King in the North," for Jon Snow, but then he, like, in Season 8, I don't know if they couldn't get the actor back, but they're like, oh yeah, he fled, again. After that whole speech, he went back. He gave up. Okay. They are the Counts of Deepwood and Howell. The Counts of Acorn Grove are House Branch. We have a white squirrel holding a red arrow on green. We find the way. We know of one branch, that being this man, Benjacourt Branch, who is currently marching with Stannis Baratheon. The county of Cloud Forest is ruled by House Moss. The Ben Senator could imply that they're some kind of bastard house, maybe. They're a semi-canon house mentioned on the Citadel. And of course, how can we forget the county of Mull Root, ruled by House Bowl. Hugo Bowl, what a name. House Bowl is a house that marches with Stannis, again after they take Deepwood Motte back from the Ironborn. This strip of land, called Sea Dragon Point, is ruled by, no one, but it can be granted to the Glovers, who rule over all of its counties, Flatmire, Sea Dragon Point and Stillport. Likewise, the Black Pines does not have a duke, but it can be given to House Forrester. House Forrester also rule over the county of Ironrath. Here we have a white tree on black. Iron from ice. So House Forrester are canon to the books, but they are adapted and expanded upon in the Telltale game. Again, I haven't played it, but I know that they're meant to be the main characters. In the books, they're marching with Stannis onto Winterfell. In the Telltale game, I can't tell you that much about them, because I try to avoid spoilers, but I did try to look up some of the character names, and I know that there is a Gregor, and a Roderick, and an Asher, and also there are bastards, Jazeera and Elsera Snow. But yeah, this is a fun little thing to include for those who are fans of the Telltale game. I should really play that game. I should live stream it. I should play it with Quinn the GM. I should drag him on. A couple of the counties are ruled by the Starks, Alpine and Darset. County of Moorwood is ruled by the Glovers. But High Point is ruled by, who is this? House Whitehill. Again, it looks like a white hill, basically, on blue. Even higher. They are a semi-canon house that belong to the Citadel. But before we move on, I didn't look at the vassals of House Forrester itself. So the Barony of Wrathwood Tower is ruled by House de Gore. 3 black bullheads on yellow. Yield to none. House de Gore are also in the Telltale game. As are the Barons of Thunderbrook. House Tuttle, a pig. So I wonder if the people who made the Telltale game are deliberately referencing Lisa Tuttle. Lisa Tuttle being a fantasy and sci-fi author and a former collaborator of George R. R. Martin. And then right below the wall we have the Northern Mountains, which is not a duchy, and I like that, because these are not ruled by houses, they're ruled by clans. And there are a lot of them. The counties of Holdwater, Scar Mountain and Trenchstone are ruled by House Wull. 3 buckets on blue. Yet my hope is unbroken. So the Wulls are the most powerful mountain clan, and the chief of the clan is known as the Wull, which is quite fun. They absolutely despise the Ironborn. And here's our boy, the chief himself, Big Bucket, Hugo Wull. He swears fealty to Stannis Baratheon out of sheer hatred for the Boltons. We know that Theo Wull was killed at the Tower of Joy, along with all the others, and they've made Theo the brother of the Big Bucket. The county of Arundel is ruled by House Harclay, and here on a white bend we have 3 moons, waxing, full and waning, by mountain and moon. We know of a Ronald Harclay, who's a ranger of the Night's Watch. He survived the Fist of the First Men, but then he kind of disappears from the story. He's not mentioned again, so he probably dies during the mutiny at Craster's Keep. The county of Braidmont is ruled by Clan Knot. Wait for Quinn the GM to make a House Knot video and the thumbnail will be something like, not technically a house or some bullshit. But yeah, we got a brown knot here. The ties that bind us. And of course, this clan is ruled by the Knot. As with all the others, they march with Stannis Baratheon. The county of Breakstone Hill is ruled by House Flint, the OG House Flint. This is the original. They're not the most powerful, but they are described as being the oldest branch of House Flint, so they are the original. Their chief is of course known as, you guessed it, the Flint. Historically, there's the tragic tale of Dany Flint, who was a girl who dressed up as a boy to join the Night's Watch, so a bit of a Mulan story, but with a dark twist. She ended up being murdered at the Night Fort by her black brothers. So Torgon is their ruler. He's known as the Old Flint, and he's actually too old to march with Stannis. He stays behind. But his sons do join Stannis, that being Donal, Black Donal Flint, and Artos Flint. Now Artos absolutely hates the Lord of Light, and so they've given him the Zealous trait, which is a fun touch. The Duchy of Carvestone is ruled by House Burleigh, cut true, cut clean, a white dagger. During the War of the Five Kings, they suffer heavy losses to Gregor Clegane, but nonetheless, they march on Winterfell with Stannis. And in the past, there was a Lothar Burleigh, who was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who met Alysanne Targaryen when she visited. The county of Pynesend is ruled by House Liddle. How can we forget the Liddles? Much in little. Ruled by, you guessed it, the chief himself, the Liddle. I've said Liddle too many times. The eldest son is Big Liddle, who's a ranger of the Night's Watch. The second son is called Middle Liddle, and he helps Stannis take back Deepwood Motte, and he himself nearly kills Asher Greyjoy. And then the youngest is called Little Liddle. And finally, the county of Stoutfast is ruled by the Norrie clan, and its chief is the Norrie. Brandon is described as being skinny and fox-like. He is too old to join Stannis, but his son Brandon does. Brandon the Younger. We also know of an Owen Norrie, who is one of Robb Stark's personal guard. He has a personal battle guard of about 30 noble people, but he is shot with arrows during the Red Wedding. And to complete our journey of the west half of the north, we have Bear Island, ruled by House Mormont. Here we stand, a black bear on green. So they possess the Valyrian steel sword Longclaw. The original lord was the old bear himself, Gior, who willingly joined the Night's Watch. He rose through the ranks and became the Lord Commander in 288. I'll probably talk more about him when I do my CK3 Game of Thrones Wall and Beyond video. He was succeeded by his son, Lord Jorah. In the show, he's the handsome, endearing Dilf, Sir Friendzone. In the books, he's the creep. So Jorah was initially married to a Glover, who then died without having any kids. He fought in the Battle of the Trident and the Siege of Pike, and after that battle, he was knighted by Bobby B himself. He took part in the tourney of Lannisport and named Lynesse Hightower as the Queen of Love and Beauty, that being the youngest daughter of Lord Leighton Hightower. Look at that age gap, oh my god, he loves it. So yes, it's a classic tale of romance. They married, she hated it there, she spent all his money, he went broke, he enslaved a couple of poachers, sold them, people found out about it, he fled to Essos with his wife. She became the head concubine of Tregor or Mullen, the merchant prince, and then he became a depressed sellsword. You know, it's the usual story. So Varys hires him to spy on Daenerys with a promise of being pardoned and returning back to Westeros. During this process, he goes on to fully support her cause. He also kind of wants to bang her because he's a creep. Eventually, Daenerys finds out and exiles him, but he wants to get back into her good graces, so he kidnaps Tyrion, just like in the show. Ironically, considering his history, he himself is enslaved, so currently he's got this big demon mask tattooed onto his face. But yes, after he fled into exile, Gior's sister became the Lady of Bear Isle. Maege Mormont, the She-Bear, a fierce warrior in her own right. She joins Robb during the War of the Five Kings, but she's later ordered to join Galbart Glover and Lord Mallister in travelling to the Neck. Again, potentially with Robb Stark's will. And we haven't seen her since. Just like Galbart Glover, she has a cheeky little cameo in the first season of Game of Thrones. So Maege has 5 daughters. No one seems to know who the father is, but the children are legitimate, so they're not bastards, so I don't know what's going on there. She's got like a mystery husband. There are some rumours that the father's Tormund, because he bragged about bedding a bear and she's a she-bear, but I don't know. They would literally be bastards in that case, so I don't know. So Daisy is the sort of lanky but pretty one, and she's one of Robb's personal guard. She joins him at the Red Wedding, and she's killed by Ryman Frey, who bursts in and embeds an axe in her stomach. And if you've seen my Red Wedding video, you'll know that she smashed a tankard into Benfrey Frey's face, and he later dies of his wounds, so That may have been her. She may have killed a Frey on her way out. Unlike her pretty older sister, Alysanne Mormont is sort of short and squat and homely. And she's got a couple of kids, Lyra and Jorel. She's the current heir to House Mormont and is assigned to guard the captive Asher Greyjoy during the march. The last that we hear of her, she's being sent by Stannis to escort Jeyne Poole up to the wall. The youngest of the 5 daughters is Lyanna Mormont, who's obviously named after Lyanna Stark, and she writes that famous letter to Stannis: Bear Island knows no king but the king of the north, whose name is Stark. She's the Lady Mormont in the show, and she's given a bigger role. As well as ruling over the island of Bear Island, the Mormonts rule over the county of Bearstone and the county of Mormont. So yeah, they rule everything. Now the Duchy of Keystone, ruled by House Locke. 2 bronze keys crossing over each other in front of purple and white, under lock and key. Another tale of kings that were subjugated by the Starks and turned into vassals, blah blah blah. So this guy is Lord Andrew Locke, known as the Old Lord Locke. He's described as an elderly, sort of like vulturous man. Is vulturous a word? He attends the Winterfell wedding. One morning he eats gruel with Wyman Manderly, and then when Wyman is injured he calls for a maester to help him, so some fans think maybe they're working together. Is his support of the Boltons just a ruse? We don't know. Here we have Sir Donal Locke, also known by his secret agent code 32. Donal fights in the War of the Five Kings. He gets captured by Lannister forces, but then later on we see him at the Red Wedding, so he must have been released at some point. He gets shot down by crossbow bolts. And we also know of a Sir Malador Locke. This guy. He's a ranger of the Night's Watch. His fate is currently unknown. Like, he either died at the Fist of the First Men, or while retreating from the Fist, or during the mutiny at Craster's Keep. We don't really know. Here is Sybil Locke. Sybil goes on to become Robert Glover's wife. She's got the zealous trait here. She is described as a pious woman. She's currently the Lady of Deepwood Motte. There's also an unnamed Locke who's a guest at White Harbour, so I guess that could be any of the other sons that the mod has added. Oh, and I nearly forgot, Rickard Stark's mother was a Locke. They rule all of their counties: Beam Cross, Bites Edge, Grey's Ward, Keygard and Oldcastle. Ah, and now we have the Manderleys. The Manderley merman holding the trident. No currents mightier. If you've seen my animated House Manderley video, you'll know that the Manderleys come from the River Mander, somewhere here. They were driven out by the Gardeners and the Peaks, and they fled up north, where they bent the knee to the Stark King, and they were given, at first, Wolf's Den, but then they created the city of White Harbour with their riches, and the new castle. So they're a wealthy, prosperous house that has carried some southern culture and religion. So they're a wealthy, prosperous house that's brought southern culture up north, including the faith of the Seven. So in the past there was a big civil war known as the Anarchy. So a historical Lord Manderley married a Gardener daughter, and a Lord Peake married another Gardener daughter, and the Gardener King died without any sons, and so the Peakes and Manderleys went to war. I'm wondering whether this is a reference to that Manderley, because, as it says here, this one died in battle. And then here we have Lord Martin of White Harbour, the first Lord of White Harbour, which makes me think this is meant to be the Manderley who fled into exile. After the Targaryens took over, Sir Warwick Manderley was commanded to take over the Northern Army and attack the Three Sisters, after Marla Sunderland declared herself the Queen. Here's the Chungus himself, Lord Theomore Manderley. He's described as having 3 sons and several daughters and lots of nieces and nephews. And the mod has abided by this, as you can see, by the influx of Manderleys. So Theomore was widowed 4 times, and he hosted Queen Alyssa Targaryen when she visited. He ended up being betrothed to Alyssa's daughter, Visera. Despite the fact he had, sons, even though she was a teenager, because, George is weird. Okay, there may be some possible Hot D spoilers, so if you don't want any of that, skip to the next chapter. So this guy is Lord Desmond. He negotiated with Jacaerys Velaryon, and wanted his daughter to marry Jacaerys' brother, Joffrey. After this was agreed to, he joined Team Black. He then died during the Winter Fever after the Dance of the Dragons was over. His eldest son, Medric, joined Rhaenyra in King's Landing with his brother. He was one of the famous 7 who rode out into the city to rescue Joffrey Velaryon after he fell off his dragon. He travelled back to White Harbour and became Lord after his father died, but then, tragically, he too also died of the Winter Fever. He was succeeded by his intelligent brother, Torrhen. Torrhen was one of Aegon III's 7 regents. He resigned when his father and brother died and became the new lord, but then he came back to King's Landing to be Aegon III's Hand of the King. He was competent, but he and Aegon never really got on. And then when he turned 16, Aegon fired him. Here's a nice touch too. It's mentioned that he travelled to King's Landing with his cousins, and so he's been given cousins. So many great touches in this mod, you know. So much attention to detail. But of course, we need to look at Lord Lamprey himself. Lord Lard, Lord Too Fat to Sit a Horse. Gluttonous, yeah, that makes sense. Patient, yeah, he's a schemer, he's willing to wait, he's willing to play the fool. Vengeful, oh, without question. Intricate web weaver, yes, of course, he's a bit of a schemer. Seducer, okay, now that's surprising. Yeah, he's a ruthless, cunning man. He fought in the Battle of the Trident when he was younger, and his life was saved by a lad named Sir Bartimus, who he granted the Wolf's Den to. In the books, he joins the Winterfell Harvest Feast, hosted by Bran, and he plays his little political games. So he offers to mint northern coinage in White Harbour, he offers to create a new fleet for Robb Stark. He's basically trying to accumulate power. After the Red Wedding, however, he wants revenge. He's planning on betraying the Boltons and Freys in some way. He tells Davos that if he rescues Rickon from Skargos, Rickon Stark can be brought back to rule Winterfell, and then he will support Stannis as king. And he probably turns 3 Freys into pies. He's last seen getting slashed in the neck by Hostine Frey after insulting his dead nephew, but he's still alive due to all the fat. Cool, they've made his rival Mervyn Peake as a nod to that historical rivalry. So yes, he has 2 sons. There's Willas Manderly, who's a big, quiet man with a cheeky moustache. Looks like all the names have disappeared. I guess it might be the update. Maybe I've done something wrong. He joins the War of the Five Kings and joins Roose Bolton's army. He gets captured by Lannisters at the Battle of the Green Fork, and he's freed after Roose takes Harrenhal, but then he's captured again and brought back to Harrenhal. His father offers fealty to the Iron Throne and offers to wed his granddaughters to Freys, and in exchange Willas is returned to White Harbour. He has 2 daughters, Winifred, who is betrothed to Rhaegar Frey, although along with her grandfather she's pretending to be happy at the betrothal, but she knows his true plans. As you can see here, patient and deceitful, much like Wyman himself. And then Willas's other daughter is Wyler, who's quite a feisty girl. Wyman's other son is Wendell, who unlike his older brother is loud and boisterous. He's also got a cheeky moustache. He's one of Robb Stark's sworn swords, so he attends the Red Wedding but gets shot through the mouth with a crossbow bolt. And the Freys tried to claim that he was killed by Robb Stark, transforming into a wolf. The Freys tried to claim that he died when Robb Stark turned into a wolf and ate him or some shit. Marlon Manderly is Wyman's cousin and the captain of the Newcastle Guard. He, of course, is in on Wyman's secret plots. In the book, he's described as having a personal coat of arms, 3 silver mermaids on purple, but that isn't displayed here. And of course, there's his cousin, who he tries to marry, Donella Hornwood, who is married to Hallis Hornwood. We'll go into her a bit more when we talk about the Hornwoods. The Manderlys rule over the county of White Harbour, and there's the Newcastle. They also rule over the province of Wolf's Den, which is that old Stark castle. It's currently a prison. The counties of Silverfield and the Gap are ruled by House Silverfield, whose sigil is clearly a reference to the one described in the book belonging to Marlon Manderly, which is cool. 3 silver mermaids on purple. But yeah, this house is non-canon, they're not mentioned in the books. The counties of White Knife and Whitford are ruled by House Waterman, a couple of oars. Float on. They are semi-canon because they're mentioned on the Citadel website. The county of Wetmarsh is ruled by House Marsh, 10 green froggies. Be mindful. As you can see, House Marsh are bordering the lands of the Crannog men, which is a nice touch. We know of one Marsh in the books, that being the one and only Pomegranate himself, Bowen Marsh, the Lord Steward of the Night's Watch. He becomes the temporary Castellan of Castle Black during the Great Ranging, and then he's the acting commander of the Watch until a new Lord Commander is selected. He gets increasingly mad at Jon for decisions such as, letting the Wildlings join the Watch, and then the final straw is when Jon threatens to march on Winterfell to overthrow Ramsay Bolton, and so he and other conspirators assassinate Jon Snow while crying. So I think that the cynical trait works well there. The county of Woodward is ruled by House Mazin, a bunch of gold plates, The Last of Us. This is semi-canon again. This house belongs to the Game of Thrones TV show. It's one of the few houses that sides with Jon Snow against the Boltons. It's a deliberate reference to Craig Mazin, who's a friend of Benioff and Weiss who gave them advice on how to improve the pilot episode. He wrote the HBO shows Chernobyl and The Last of Us, and hence, here we go, The Last of Us. That's a nice touch. The land of Everstead does not have a duke, but it can be given to House Woolfield. 3 white wool stacks on purple, guarding the flock. So this is a canon house. They're sworn to House Manderley. It's never stated where they're from exactly, but here they've been put in charge of Ramsgate. Oh, and also Sheepshead Hills, both of which are locations from the books. Leona Woolfield is the wife of Wylas Manderley. Okay, I do have a couple of nitpicks here, so get ready. First off, she's explicitly stated as having yellow hair. And she also states that, you know, the Seven defends White Harbour, and here it says she worships the old gods. So yeah, this mod is utterly disgraceful. I can't even play this. I can't. No. It's over. The Duchy of Crestview is ruled by House Flint of Widow's Watch. This is a cadet branch. We have a couple of eyes above the waves. Ever vigilant. They're described as being the most powerful branch. So Lady Lyessa Flint is the Lady of Widow's Watch. In the books she gets pregnant and becomes ill. She gets over her illness, but we never know if the baby survives or not. Wyman Manderley seems to believe that she would rally behind Stannis Baratheon if the Manderleys did so first. So she's the mother of Robin Flint. Catelyn describes him as being of a mature age, which is weird because that suggests he's an older man, but he has a mother who's pregnant, so that's kind of weird. So I guess Catelyn means, you know, mature as in adult, I guess, compared to Robb Stark, who's a teenager. He is on Robb's personal guard, and he attends the Red Wedding. He's surrounded and stabbed to death by Freys. This guy, Byam Flint, is actually at the Night's Watch, specifically at the Shadow Tower, and he joins the Great Ranging. He survives the Fist of the First Men, but then he disappears from the story, so he must have died at some point, probably Craster's Keep. This branch of House Flint rule over the counties of Broadmend, Tawny Bay, the Broken Branch, and Widow's Watch. The county of Branchside is ruled by House Holt. Halt before me. We know of a Maynard Holt at Eastwatch by the Sea. He's a captain of the Night's Watch ship called the Talon. He's sent to rescue the free folk at Hardhome. Now onto the Hornwood with House Hornwood. Brown stag on orange. Righteous in wrath. As is stated in the books, they border the Manderleys and the Boltons. So Lord Hallis Hornwood marches with Roose Bolton and is killed at the Battle of the Green Fork. His son, meanwhile, Darren, fights with Robb Stark at the Battle of the Whispering Wood, and he's also killed. So that leaves Hallis's wife, Donella Manderley, as the Lady of the Hornwood. She ends up being captured by Ramsay Snow, who forcefully marries her, and then leaves her to starve to death in a tower. She eats all her fingers off, which the characters think is out of starvation, but as the readers we find out that it's probably because her fingers were flayed. We know that a Berenna Hornwood is married to Leopold Tallheart. Hallis also has a bastard son called Larren Snow, who I guess hasn't been born yet. The Hornwoods rule the counties of Calfton, Hornwood and Velvet Grove. The Cinders is ruled by House Ashwood. Bound by blood, that's cool. We know that the Ashwoods once held the castle of Wolf's Den, but we don't know if they're still around in the books or not. Okay, it's the moment you've been waiting for. Let's move on to the Dreadfort, ruled by House Bolton. The red flayed man on pink. Our blades are sharp. They reside at the edgy Dreadfort. They are known for flaying their enemies. If the Starks are the werewolves of the north, then the Boltons are basically the vampires. If you've seen my animated Bolton video, then you'll know they were once Red Kings. This guy, Royce II, burned Winterfell to the ground. So he's wrathful, yes, he's a skilled tactician because he beat the Starks. They've also made him a torturer, probably alluding to the fact that the Boltons were known for flaying their enemies and displaying their skin in dungeons and so on. King Royce IV was also known as Royce Redarm, because he used to disembowel his enemies. So again, yeah, the torture trait, and the wrathful trait, and the sadistic trait, lovely. Classic Bolton. The last Red King was Rogar the Huntsman, this guy. He submitted to the Starks and became a lord. Huntsman, I wonder what or who he hunted exactly. Here's Balthazar Bolton. He apparently, during the northern invasion of the Sisters, apparently Balthazar created the Pink Pavilion, which was a giant pavilion made out of the skin of sister men. We don't really hear about the Boltons much during the Tug era, except for Lady Barbara Bolton. She attends the Maiden's Day Ball, offers her hand in marriage to Aegon III, but she throws in something extra. She says, look, Aegon, we need more food in the north, we need more resources, help us out. So yeah, she's honest. But let's move on to the Leech Lord himself. Called so because he puts leeches on. He is indifferent to lives. Authoritative. He does scare people, even with a whisper. So he fought in the Battle of the Trident back in the day, and even suggested that Robert Baratheon should cut Barristan Selmy's throat. He joined Robb during the War of the Five Kings, and he's given half of the army to command. He's a pretty cunning man, making a deal with the Brave Companions to seize Harrenhal, but eventually he sees the tide turning and betrays the Starks. He organises the Red Wedding with Lothar Frey, and then he, personally stabs Robb Stark in the heart. The Lannisters reward him by making him Warden of the North and the Lord Paramount and all that stuff. And he's granted Winterfell, which he gives to his bastard son Ramsay. The last we see him, he's trapped within Winterfell by a blizzard, and Stannis is slowly approaching outside. He's probably not going to last long. So yeah, it's mentioned he has sons who died in the cradle, so here names have been put to them, Daemon and Walton. He has 2 wives, the first we know nothing about. The second was Bethany Riswell, who eventually died of an illness. But together they had Domeric Bolton. He was a quiet lad who liked horse riding and reading books and all that kind of stuff. He was fostered by Lord Redfort in the Vale, which might explain why he turned out normal. Unfortunately, he's poisoned by his bastard brother, Ramsay. Obviously, he's too young to have all of his adult traits, but so far, he's rowdy. Yeah, that's an understatement. He's a bastard, yeah. Ugly, yeah. Quick, he is. He has low cunning. In a lunatic, see, I'm not sure I agree with this. He is a, complete sadistic monster, but lunatic sort of implies, hallucinations, delusions. It kind of implies psychosis. He doesn't have trouble distinguishing what's real and what isn't. He is just a monster. So yeah, he's Roos's bastard, and he hunts women and flays people and turns Theon into Reek. He's just a monster. In the books, he disguises himself as Reek and helps Theon in Winterfell, but then betrays him and sacks the castle, and eventually things work out for him and he becomes Lord of Winterfell, and he marries Jane Poole disguised as Arya Stark. The last we see him, he's riding out of Winterfell to fight Stannis Baratheon. So I've spotted some interesting people in Roose Bolton's court. We've got Walton Steelshanks, who's a captain who accompanies Jaime Lannister to King's Landing. We've got the original Reek, who was just this grotesque, smelly man who was sent away from the castle to help raise Ramsay, and we don't know who corrupted who, but they both went about, doing horrible things. Yeah, sadistic, lustful. I'm not going to go into what he did with dead bodies. We even have some of the bastard's boys here, those being Ramsay's friends. Grunt doesn't have a tongue. Alan is known as Sour Alan because he smells. Skinner is great at flaying people. Dick is known as Yellow Dick for some reason. Daemon, that's probably Daemon Dance for Me, who has a whip, and presumably he likes to say dance for me as he whips people. There's Luton. So the Boltons rule over the counties of, brace yourself, Ethering, Grimlake, Matchwood, the Dreadfort, the Pale, the Weep, and Wraithfeld. The county of Overton is ruled by House Overton. Follow me. They're a semi-canon house from the Citadel website. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room. The county of Wrightwell is ruled by House... Good Man. As we can see, the sigil is 20 good men. Speaking of, there's the man himself, 20 Goodman, who is in the court of Roose Bolton. So this is a reference to the Game of Thrones meme where, in Season 5 I think, Stannis' entire camp is burned by Ramsay's 20 good men, which is kind of ridiculous. So then everyone started joking about Sir 20 of House Goodmen. And here he is, the man who single-handedly defeated Stannis. I do want to know where 10 Goodmen is though. Bronn said he could impregnate the Eyrie. The Duchy of Carhold is ruled by House Karstark, which is a Stark cadet branch. The sigil is a white blazing sun on black, the Son of Winter. They are descended from a minor Stark called Carlan, who helped put down a rebellion, and so he was granted his own castle, Carhold. And then over the generations, the Starks of Carhold became the Karstarks of Carhold. In the books we have Lord Rickard. Wrathful, arrogant, callous, yeah, that all makes sense. So during the War of the Five Kings, one of his sons gets captured and 2 of them are slain. He is furious. He personally slays Sir Stafford Lannister himself with a lance at the Battle of Oxcross. And after Catelyn reveals a villainous plan, he openly supports Stannis Baratheon, hoping that the Lannisters will kill Haryon Karstark, which would make Alice the Lady of Carhold, and then he wants to marry Alice to her cousin, Cregan, who's his eldest son. He is of course secretly working with the Boltons though. There's a Winds of Winter sample chapter where Stannis uncovers his treachery and is basically like, listen, you're gonna die either way. Whether it's death by beheading or death by fire depends on if you cooperate. We know of his sons Cregan and Arthur. Arthur is present when Stannis uncovers Arnulf's treachery, and Cregan rides after Alice Karstark, who escapes to the Wall, and then the Night's Watch arrest him and throw him in the ice cells. To stop her cousins from stealing all her power from her, Alice Karstark goes on to marry Sigorn of Thenn, the Wildling. The Karstarks rule the counties of Eastmelt, Everwood, Greycliff Point, Carhold, Sleetwood and the Grey Cliffs. The county of Dorridge is ruled by House Dormund. Freedom at last. House Dormund is semi-canon. They appear in the Game of Thrones TV show. There's a bit where Amory Lorch sends a letter detailing Lannister infantry movements to Lord Marlin Dormund instead of Lord Daemon Marbrand. And the county of Groundpress is ruled by House Lightfoot. Watch your step. This is a semi-canon house from the Citadel. Frostfields has no duke. It can be given to the counts of Coldenside, Frostguard, Last River and Lonely Hills, that being the Umbers, but we'll look at them soon. The county of Long Lake is ruled by House Lake, what the water gave us. Another semi-canon house from the Citadel. And the county of Long Streams is ruled by House Long. 3 love hearts and us. Our line is long. House Long were one of many houses who once held Wolf's Den. In the past there was a Gareth Long. He was the Master at Arms for Lord Peake and later King's Landing, during the reign of Aegon III, and he was a conspirator in the plot against House Rogara, and he was sent to the Wall. And in the main books we know of a Lucifer Long. He serves the sellsword Windblown Company. The Duchy of Last Lands is ruled by House Umber, and if you haven't seen my recent Umber video, check it out. We got the Chained Giant on red. Break the chains. They rule over Last Hearth, the northernmost castle that doesn't belong to the Night's Watch, and they are chonkers. A very classic story, they were once kings who were subjugated by the Starks. There's Harmond Umber, the drunken giant. He's got the drunkard trait and the giant trait, how fitting. He joined Willem Stark in fighting against King Raymond Redbeard, the king beyond the wall. And here we have the Great John's grandfather, Lord Hoarfrost. We don't know much about him except that he had 3 sons, the eldest of whom is unnamed in the books, but here he is Brandon. Brandon's son is Jon Umber, the Great John, named so for his immense height. As we know, the Great John is a great character. He initially questions Robb Stark, but after getting his fingers bitten off by Grey Wind, he's like, no, I'm with you all the way. He fights fiercely at the War of the Five Kings, and at the Red Wedding, he's able to kill a bunch of people and wound others and bite someone's ear off. Certain Freys are tasked with getting him drunk, but he drinks them under the table. That's how powerful he is. He is ultimately captured, and so like his sigil, he is a chained giant. Although I'm sure he'll escape in the future. We know he has multiple sons, but we only know the name of one, that being Jon Umber, known as the Small John, even though he's basically the same height, perhaps taller. He's in Robb Stark's personal battle guard, but he ends up being beheaded at the Red Wedding. Hoarfrost's second son, of course, is Mors Umber, known as Crowfood. As you can see, he has a dragon glass eye, which is awesome. So he's called Crowfood because he was passed out at the side of a road and a crow bit out his eye, and then he grabbed the crow and bit off its head in revenge, and so he's Crowfood. And he replaced the eye with a chunk of obsidian. He's the joint castellan of Last Hearth along with his brother, although after the Red Wedding he declares fealty to Stannis. He has his men dig holes and blow horns outside of Winterfell to cause chaos. And as I said in my animated video, in the Winter he may be dead. He may have been killed and beheaded by the Freys. But according to a Wind sample chapter, all that blowing meant that Aenys Frey fell down a pit and broke his neck, so he managed to kill one before going out. We know that Mors had sons who died at the Battle of the Trident, so here we have Rickard and Torren. And we also know he has a daughter, who was kidnapped by wildlings, so here we have Berenna Umber. Finally we have Hother Horsebane, called so because he gutted a prostitute who tried to steal from him. This was when he was in Old Town, because his father had sent him off to become a maester, but I guess that never panned out. The whole prostitute story is told in whispers, because apparently it was a man, hence they have given him the homosexual trait. Unlike his brother, Horsebane swears fealty to the Boltons, due to the Great John being a hostage. Of course, there are many theories that he's secretly working against the Boltons. The Umbers rule over the counties of Last Hearth, Sealshore, Sullen Hills and Whitemoor. The county of Blackmantle is ruled by House Blackbrow, never forget. This is not a house in the books, but this is a deep cut, so prepare yourself. So in the show, obviously Ned Stark is reading through the lineages and histories of the great houses, you know, that big ponderous book. And when he looks at House Umber, it shows that someone called Emilia Umber was married to Jor Blackbrow. And it mentions other Blackbrows such as Marek, Hellos and Emilia. So here we have Jor and his wife, who is Emilia Umber. The book also mentions Marek, Helos and Emilia, so nice touch. Similarly, we have the county of Woodhaven, ruled by House Greenleaf. A Dream of Spring. Very nice. Yet another show-only house from that Lineages and Histories book. So yeah, it talks about a Mikon Greenleaf. It also speaks of a Maria Greenleaf married to Finn Umber. I didn't show this earlier, but it looks like they've made a whole bunch of minor Umber cousins to fit in with this. Finally, we have the island of Skagos, which is not a duchy. So this is where the Stoneborn live. They're sacrificers, cannibals, unicorn breeders apparently. They have little contact with the mainland, who absolutely despise them and call them skags. Rickon and Osha flee here, and so Wyman Manderley sends Davos to sail up. So before we look at the counties, we're going to look at the ruin of Skane. So this island is Skane. Apparently there's a horrific event in the past where the Skagosi invaded Skane and wiped it out, just completely slaughtered everyone, apparently ate them too. So the duchies of Dregan Ara, Rhysdu, Sudik, Tig, and Vexdenk, oh, you know what, this is going to be tough. Vexdenk is ruled by House Crowell, Red Fire's Black Skies. House Crowell are mentioned in the books. It's said that a Lord Commander, Crowell, led the Night's Watch like 1,000 years ago. The counties of Drihisesk and Rompersk is ruled by House Magnar, green lobster holding a spear on white. Lords of Stone. So their name derives from the word Magnar, which is the Old Tongue word for lord. So the Thens are ruled by the Magnar of the Thens. And finally we've got the county of Molskir, ruled by House Stain, a dead tree on green, born of stone. Another canon house, and all we really know about them is that in the past a Stain became a first ranger for the Night's Watch. There we have it. The series is complete. Every Westerosi house explained. It only took me like a year. I'm probably going to explore the Wall and beyond in the future, as well as faiths and cultures and that kind of thing. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this series, and what exactly I should do next. Click on this video to watch every Vale house explained. Or if you want to see my animated content, check out the history of House Umber. Feel free to like this video, subscribe to Fantasy Haven, and check out the Patreon. Special thanks to my patrons, Andre, Coleshot, Dev Cole, and Caden. See you next time.